My son-in-law didn't know I owned 51% of his company and had assets worth $3 billion. He thought I was just a poor worker. One night he invited me to dinner at his mansion. He smiled perfectly. "Just sign here, old man." I pulled out my phone, sent a message. Soon, everything would change. Who did I send that message to? The answer will shock you. But first, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Now we'll start with an early morning to make everything clear. 6:15. The coffee maker sputtered its morning greeting, same as it had for 9 years now. I stood at the kitchen counter and watched steam curled toward the ceiling, while December cold pressed against the windows. Ruth's photograph sat on the mantel above the gas fireplace silver frame, catching early light. I'd straightened it yesterday. Somehow it had tilted again overnight. The way her reading glasses used to slip down her nose when she got absorbed in a book. Some habits the house kept, even after she was gone. I carried my cup to the living room window. Across Frankfurt Avenue, row houses stood shoulder to shoulder, like old men at a bus stop. Tune 847, my address for 47 years. A 400 square FT of brick and hardwood, bought in 1978 for $42,000 when that kind of money still meant something to a man who earned it with his hands. Mo Murphy was already sweeping her front steps 3 doors down. The woman rose with the sun always had. The morning SEPTA trolley screeched past its steel wheels singing that particular Philadelphia song of metal on metal. Kensington clears throat working-ass neighborhood. Though the real estate people were trying hard to call it something fancier these days. Back when Ruth and I moved in, nobody needed fancy names. It was just home. My Honda Accord sat at the curb where I'd left it last night, 12 years old. Blue paint faded to something closer to primer gray. Passenger mirror held on with duct tape and optimism, but the engine was solid. That's what mattered. A car gets you from here to there. Ruth used to say that. No need for more. I finished my coffee and rinsed the cup, watching water swirl down the drain. 50 years of marriage made routines feel like conversations. I could still hear her voice sometimes pointing out I'd used too much soap again, reminding me Tuesday was recycling day. The small corrections that meant someone knew you. Someone cared enough to notice. The tablet sat on the kitchen table where I'd left it, charging overnight. I unlocked it with my thumbprint and pulled up the account. Numbers appeared, clean columns, balances. That would look strange to anyone who knew me. I scrolled through the quarterly reports, nodded to myself, set it back down. Some mornings required just coffee and silence. Others required knowing certain things were exactly where you'd left them. By 8 I was dressed for the day. Tuesday meant grocery shopping. I'd learned to buy for one, though my hands still sometimes reached for the second package of chicken or extra carton of eggs out of muscle memory. The cashiers at Save-A-Lot on Frankfurt knew me by name. Now, Mrs. Rodriguez always asked about Vivian, and I always said she was doing fine. Mostly true, depending on how you measured fine. 24 years. That's how long I'd been watching my daughter navigate a marriage that sat in my stomach like food gone bad. Bradford Whitmore. Even the name sounded expensive, like something you'd see on a country club roster or corporate letterhead. He'd swept her off her feet when she was 24, fresh out of grad school with her social work degree and a heart that wanted to fix everything broken in the world. I'd seen it at their first dinner together. The way he looked at me across the table. The way his handshake lingered just a second too long, communicating ownership instead of welcome. But you can't tell a daughter those things. Not when she's in love. Not when she believes in second chances and the fundamental goodness of people. So I'd kept quiet and watched from a distance the way fathers do when their children walk into woods darker than they realize. I made the 6-block walk to Save-A-Lot, nodding at familiar faces. Mr. Patterson had his truck hood up again, engine parts spread across a tarp like he was performing surgery. The Gonzalez kids waited at their bus stop backpacks bigger than their small bodies. Life in Kensington moved at its own rhythm, measured in paychecks and rent days, and the hope that maybe next month would be a little easier. The afternoon found me back in my chair by the window with a book I'd been working through for 3 weeks. Retirement was supposed to feel like freedom. Some days, it just felt like waiting. Waiting for what I wasn't always sure. Maybe just waiting for the world to need something from me again. The tablet chimed. Email notification, I picked it up, swiped to open it. Subject line WDG board meeting, emergency session. December 10th, I read it twice. Whitmore Development Group, emergency session, Bradford's company. My pulse stayed steady, but something shifted in my chest. The way air pressure changes before weather moves in. Another notification appeared before I could set the tablet down. Text message. Martin, call me when you can. No punctuation, no explanation. Martin didn't waste words. 45 years of friendship taught you when brevity meant urgency. I looked at the clock. 4:20. Then at Ruth's photograph on the mantel frame, still tilted despite my straightening through the window. Shadows were lengthening across Frankfurt Avenue. December light died early. Something was coming. I could feel it the way you feel storm fronts in your bones when you get old enough. The phone rang at 4:37 p.m. I knew before I looked at the screen. Knew the way you know things when you've been a father long enough to recognize trouble by the quality of silence before it announces itself. Vivian's name glowed in the dim room. I picked up. Hi, sweetheart. Her voice came through thin and careful, like someone walking on ice trying not to fall through. That particular tone she got when she was working very hard not to cry. Dad, Vivian said, Bradford wants you to come to dinner. I stood at the kitchen counter with the phone pressed to my ear, watching December twilight settle over Frankfurt Avenue. Her voice carried weight I'd learned to measure over 24 years of careful listening. This wasn't an invitation. This was a warning wrapped in politeness. When Saturday 7:00, he's calling it an important family meeting. She paused and I could hear her breathing on the other end, shallow and controlled. Everyone will be there. Isabel Dawson Randall. He wants the whole family present, the whole family. That was Bradford's language. That was the kind of phrasing that made gatherings sound like board meetings and dinners feel like negotiations. What's the meeting about? I kept my voice level. He didn't say exactly. Another pause. But he's been talking about legacy lately, about the company's future, about family contributions. Family contributions. In Bradford's vocabulary, that meant knowing your place, understanding the hierarchy, remembering that some people built empires while others were expected to be grateful for the view. And he's been asking questions. Vivian continued, her voice dropping lower, about your finances, your living situation, how you're managing. There it was, the real reason for her fear. You okay, sweetheart? The silence stretched long enough that I almost repeated the question. Then she spoke, and her voice was smaller than before. Isabel asked about you yesterday. She wanted to know when she'd see you again. That was the one bright spot in this whole tangled mess. Isabel, 26 years old. And somehow she'd emerged from Bradford's household with her grandmother's kindness still intact. She called me every few weeks, asked about the neighborhood, wanted to hear stories about Ruth. Dawson was different. 24 and already wearing his father's arrogance, like a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit yet. Tell her I miss her too, I said. I'll be there Saturday. Dad? Vivian's voice caught. I know this isn't easy. The way Bradford talks to you, the way she stopped herself. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let it get this far. You don't have anything to apologize for, I said quietly. You've done the best you could. Have I? The question hung in the air. Sometimes I wonder if I should have listened to you back then. Mom, too. You both tried to warn me. You were in love. I said, and you believed in second chances. That's not a weakness. 3 dinners came to mind, each one a small monument to Bradford's contempt. Bradford had just been promoted to VP of Development at Whitmore Development Group. We'd gathered at his house in Bournemouth to celebrate. He'd spent the evening talking about expansion plans and market dominance, while I sat at the far end of the table, placed there like an afterthought. When dessert came, he'd made a joke about blue-collar ethics. Everyone laughed except Vivian. I'd driven home that night with my hands tight on the steering wheel. Ruth asking me why I was so quiet, Ruth's funeral. Bradford had shown up 20 minutes late, complained about the traffic from the main line to Kensington, spent most of the reception checking his phone. When someone asked him about Vivian, he'd said she was holding up well considering the circumstances, like grief was something that happened to other people. Isabel's college graduation. Bradford had reserved a table at some expensive restaurant downtown where the waiters wore gloves and the menu didn't list prices. He'd spent an hour talking about Isabel's future prospects, while looking past me like I was part of the furniture. When I tried to congratulate her, he interrupted to introduce her to someone more important. 3 dinners, 3 data points, each one teaching me a little more about the man my daughter had married. I'll be there Saturday, I told Vivian. Whatever he's planning, we'll handle it together. Thank you, Dad. Her voice steadied slightly. I love you. Love you too, sweetheart. 2. We said our goodbyes. I walked to the window. Street lights were flickering on one by one, casting yellow pools on the pavement. Mrs. Murphy had finished sweeping. The evening SEPTA trolley rattled past, heading south towards Center City. Saturday night 7-0, an important family meeting. Bradford didn't do anything without calculation. Every gesture carried purpose. Every invitation concealed strategy. Whatever he was planning, it wasn't about reminiscing over old times or strengthening family bonds. It was about power. It always was. I picked up my phone again and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. The call connected after 2 rings. Martin, I said we need to talk tomorrow morning. Martin answered on the first ring. Russo's tomorrow 8-0. Wednesday morning found me at the corner booth in Fishtown, where the coffee was strong enough to strip paint and the waitresses called you honey, without a trace of irony. Martin Gallagher was already there when I arrived, reading the Philadelphia Inquirer with the same careful attention he'd brought to blueprints back when we both had steadier hands. You're late, he said without looking up. Traffic on Girard. I slid into the seat across from him. 45 years of friendship meant we could sit in comfortable silence while I ordered coffee and waited for the world to settle into focus. Martin folded his newspaper with precision, creasing it along lines that had been creased 1,000 times before. At 67, he looked like what he was, a man who'd worked hard, saved carefully, and retired with enough dignity to choose his own schedule. We'd met in 1979 at the shipyard in South Philadelphia, back when ships still meant something to this city, and men like us built things with our hands that would outlast us. He'd been a welder. I'd been in logistics. We'd both been young enough to believe hard work guaranteed security, old enough to know that wasn't quite true. Wednesday morning coffee, Martin said, lifting his cup. 15 years now, give or take. The waitress brought my coffee, and I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic, letting the heat seep into my fingers. Outside, Fishtown was waking up slowly. Old Polish bakeries, sitting next to new coffee shops with names that tried too hard. Bradford invited me to dinner, I said. Saturday night 7-0. Martin's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. He'd met Bradford exactly twice over the years. That had been enough. That's never good news, he said. No, it's not. I took a sip of coffee and let the memory surface. 1985. A different diner, different circumstances, but the same man sitting across from me, asking the same kind of careful questions. We'd been sitting in a place not unlike this one. When I first explained what was happening with my investments, The mining stocks had done better than expected. Much better. The numbers were growing faster than felt safe to keep in my own name, faster than felt wise to handle alone. I'd needed structure protection, someone I could trust. Absolutely. Now I need someone I can trust. I'd told him that day. Legally, Martin had listened the way he always did, with full attention and no interruption. When I'd finished explaining, he'd asked only one question. Why me? Because in 45 years, you've never lied to me once, I'd said. And because you're the only person I know who'd rather lose money than compromise integrity. 6 weeks later, the Sutton Family Trust had been established. Irrevocable, permanent. Martin Gallagher, named as trustee with full legal authority to vote shares, approve investments, sign documents, attend meetings. Harold Sutton, listed as beneficial owner. The man behind the curtain, the one who made the decisions while Martin provided the public face. The arrangement was simple. Martin would ask, I would answer. Martin would present, I would authorize. To the outside world, Martin was Riverside Holdings LLC. To anyone who cared to look at public filings, he was the registered agent, the contact person, the name on the paperwork. To Bradford and the board of Whitmore Development Group, he was the major investor who'd kept them afloat through 2 decades of questionable decisions. To me, he was the friend who'd stood up at Ruth's funeral when Bradford couldn't be bothered to look me in the eye. 40 years, Martin said. Now bringing me back to the present. I've been your voice in boardrooms you've never entered, voted your shares at meetings you've never attended, signed documents in your interest while keeping your name out of every conversation, and I've appreciated every minute of it, I said. He nodded slowly. What's happening with Whitmore Development Group? I pulled out my phone and opened the quarterly reports, sliding it across the table. Martin scrolled through the numbers with the practiced eye of someone who understood what profit margins were supposed to look like versus what they looked like when management made bad calls. Number 6, quarters of declining revenue, he said. Operating losses in the last 3, they're burning through cash reserves. They're burning through my cash reserves, I corrected. I've put in another $8 million this year alone just to keep the lights on. Martin set the phone down carefully. And Saturday's dinner. Bradford doesn't know I exist. I said as far as he's concerned, Riverside Holdings is just some investment group that's been propping up his company since 2005. He thinks he's running the show. He thinks Vivian married beneath her station. And I'm just some retired factory worker living in a row house in Kensington. What happens if he crosses a line? I met Martin's eyes across the table. We'd known each other long enough that certain conversations didn't require full sentences. He understood what I was asking. He understood what I might need him to do. Then the beneficial owner steps out of the shadows, I said quietly. Martin was silent for a long moment, his coffee cooling in front of him. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past its brakes, squealing in protest. Life in Philadelphia sounded like that. Loud, abrasive, honest. You want me on standby Saturday night? He asked. 15 minutes away, I said. Just in case. I'll text you if I need you. He nodded once. What do you think he's planning? Something that requires the whole family present, I said. Something he thinks gives him leverage. Does he have leverage? I thought about Vivian's voice on the phone, the way it had trembled, with something that wasn't quite fear but wasn't quite hope either. I thought about 24 years of watching Bradford treat my daughter like a trophy, and me like an embarrassment. I thought about the numbers on my phone and the power they represented, not the kind he thinks he does, I said. Martin finished his coffee and set the cup down with finality. 45 years, he said again. I know when to ask questions and when to just be ready. I know you do. Saturday night, then, 15 minutes away. We shook hands across the table, his grip still strong despite the years. He'd been my voice in rooms where my presence would have raised questions. He'd been my shield when anonymity mattered more than recognition. On Saturday, he might need to reveal what we'd kept hidden for 20 years. After tomorrow, nothing might ever be quite the same. Thursday morning, I sat at my kitchen table and thought about what Bradford didn't know. What almost nobody knew: the old man he'd been insulting for 24 years was worth $3 billion. The story started with inheritance, though not the kind Bradford would have recognized. 1975 mining rights in western Pennsylvania that my father had acquired during the Depression and forgotten about until an energy company came looking to lease them. $108,000 more money than I'd ever seen. More than most men in Kensington would see in a lifetime of steady work. I'd married Ruth the following year, bought the row house on Frankfurt Avenue for 4 to tat €0. Kept working at the shipyard, because that's what you did when you came from where I came from. You didn't quit just because you had money. You worked until the work was done. Between 1975 and 2000, I'd made investments, good ones, careful ones. The kind that compound quietly over decades while you live in the same house and drive the same kind of car, and let the world assume you're exactly what you appear to be. By the time the new millennium rolled around, I'd turned that inheritance into $120 million. Ruth had known. Of course she'd known. But we'd agreed early on that wealth was something you protected by not advertising it. I'd wanted our lives to feel real. I'd wanted Vivian to choose her own path without the weight of money changing how people saw her, how they treated her, what they expected from her. She'd chosen Bradford. I'd respected that choice even when I disagreed with it. But I'd also built something Bradford couldn't see. The architecture was simple. Harold Sutton owned the assets, but his name appeared nowhere on public documents. The Sutton Family Trust established in 1985 when the numbers started getting serious. Irrevocable meaning once created, it couldn't be undone without court intervention. Martin Gallagher named as trustee, giving him legal authority to manage trust assets on my behalf. Then came Riverside Holdings LLC, incorporated in Delaware, where privacy laws protected ownership information. The trust owned Riverside Holdings. Riverside Holdings owned the investments, including 51.3% of Whitmore Development Group. If Bradford had ever bothered to look at the corporate filings, and he hadn't, he would have seen this. Riverside Holdings LLC, managed by Sutton Family Trust, Martin Gallagher trustee. My name didn't appear anywhere. Delaware privacy laws protected the beneficial owner's identity. To the outside world, to Bradford, to everyone except the two of us, Martin was the investor, the man with deep pockets and patient capital. To me, he was the friend who'd stood up at Ruth's funeral when Bradford couldn't be bothered to look me in the eye. The bailout history told its own story. 2005, $8 million for a commercial project in Markham, running over budget. 2008, $15 million to cover loans during the financial crisis. 2012, $12 million for a project in Masaga that Bradford swore would turn everything around. 2015, $8 million for a contractor settlement paid while I was still trying to figure out how to sleep in a house that felt too empty after Ruth died. From 2016 to now, another $47 million had flowed from my accounts, through the trust, through Riverside Holdings, into Whitmore Development Group. $90 million total over 20 years. $90 million keeping Bradford's empire from collapsing under the weight of his own arrogance, the truth nobody wanted to acknowledge. Whitmore Development Group had posted losses in 6 of the last 8 quarters. Revenue was down. Margins were compressed. The only thing keeping the company solvent was my money filtered through structures Bradford couldn't trace, signed by a trustee, whose loyalty he'd never thought to question. Every check Martin signed was backed by my capital. Every vote Martin cast was my decision. Every handshake, every approval, every patient nod during board meetings, all of it came back to me. Bradford worked with Martin Gallagher, trustee. He worked for me. He just didn't know it. My wealth had grown over the decades the way good investments do when you're patient and strategic. Mining rights energy stocks, real estate holdings, scattered across 3 states. A portfolio managed by people Bradford would never meet in firms whose names would mean nothing to him. 3 Palin billion. That was the current number, give or take whatever the market had done today. Whitmore Development Group represented about 3% of my total holdings, a rounding error in the larger picture. To Bradford, it was his entire world. He thought he was running a successful development company. He thought his name on the door meant something. He thought the occasional capital injection from Riverside Holdings was just smart investors recognizing his brilliance. He had no idea he'd been working for his father-in-law since 2005. Friday evening, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing the latest project reports Martin had forwarded. The Wilmington development was $22 million over budget. Bradford didn't know I'd covered that shortfall last month through what the books would list as a routine capital contribution. He was drowning and didn't realize someone was holding him above water. Tomorrow night, 7:00, he was going to try to put me in my place. He was going to remind me of my station, of my worth, of how grateful I should be that his family tolerated my existence. He didn't know I owned 51.3% of everything his name was attached to. He didn't know that for 20 years, every successful project, every expansion, every moment of professional pride he'd ever felt had been bankrolled by the man he treated like an embarrassment. Tomorrow night, that might change. Saturday morning arrived with cold December clarity. Tomorrow night had become tonight. I stood at the kitchen counter with my coffee watching steam rise, while the city outside stayed quiet in that particular way Saturday mornings do. Ruth's photograph caught the early light again frame tilted just slightly. I straightened it, knowing it would shift again by tomorrow. Some things you just accepted. The day stretched ahead of me like a tunnel. At the other end, 7 Archer Bradford's mansion, a family meeting that wasn't about family at all. I drank my coffee slowly, letting the routine steady me. 9 years of mornings alone had taught me that small rituals mattered. The sound of the cup against the saucer. The way light changed as the sun rose higher. The weight of silence in a house built for 2. The phone rang at 9:00 a.m. Isabel. "Grandpa," she said, and I could hear the nervousness in her voice before she even finished my name. "Morning, sweetheart." "Grandpa, please be careful tonight." The words came out in a rush. Dad's been different preparing something. I heard him on the phone with someone about paperwork and arrangements. She was worried but didn't know details. Probably better that way. "I'll be fine," I said. "Your dad and I need to have a conversation that's about 24 years overdue." "I know," but she paused. "I love you, Grandpa." "You know that, right? I know. Love you too." After we hung up, I walked to the living room and stood in front of Ruth's photograph. Really looked at it this time. Her smile in that photo, taken at Isabel's Fth birthday party, back when Isabel still had her grandmother and Bradford still had enough decency to pretend respect. "I wish you were here for this," I said to the photograph, to the empty room, to whatever part of her might still be listening. Ruth's last words came back to me. "Whose room? March 2015. She'd squeezed my hand with what little strength she had left and said, "Take care of them, especially Vivian. She's going to need you." I'd promised. Tonight was about keeping that promise. By noon, I'd made my decision about the details. I pulled out my phone and texted Martin. "Standby confirmed. 15 minutes away. We'll text if needed." His reply came within seconds. "Ready. Briefcase packed." I went to the closet and pulled down a small accordion folder from the top shelf. Documents I'd kept for situations I'd hoped would never come. Trust papers, ownership certificates, quarterly reports, everything that proved what Bradford didn't know. I slipped it into a thin leather portfolio. Nothing conspicuous but there if I needed it. At 2 p.m. I showered and dressed. Nothing fancy. Khakis pressed but not new. A button-down shirt, blue simple. The kind of clothes that said I'd made an effort without trying to be something I wasn't. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror as I buttoned the shirt. 74 years old face, weathered by time, and work lines etched deeper than they used to be. Gray hair thinning, but still there. Hands that had built things, carried things, fixed things. But my eyes were clear, sharp. Bradford saw a poor old man when he looked at me. Tonight he'd learned to look closer. At 4:00 p.m. I made myself an early dinner. Soup from a canned bread toasted in the oven. Simple food for a stomach that needed to stay settled. I ate standing at the counter looking out at Frankfurt Avenue in the afternoon light. Mr. Patterson was walking his dog. The Gonzalez kids were playing basketball in their driveway, winter coats unzipped despite the cold. Normal Saturday afternoon in Kensington for everyone except me. At 6 p.m. I checked the tablet one last time, pulled up the accounts. The numbers were still there, solid and real. Three Poners owed $24 billion, give or take today's market fluctuations. Whitmore Development Group ownership, 51.3%. Everything documented, everything legal, everything ready if I needed to prove it. I shut the tablet off and set it back on the table. At 6:15, I locked the front door of 2847 Frankfurt Avenue and walked to my Honda. The car started on the first try, engine turning over with that reliable sound I'd come to trust. I backed out of the space carefully, the way you do when you've been driving the same car for 12 years and know exactly how it handles. 6:30. I merged onto I-76 West, heading toward the main line. In the rear-view mirror, Kensington faded away. The narrow rows, the corner stores, the SEPTA stops, where people waited for buses that ran late. My world for 47 years getting smaller as I drove. Ahead of me, the main line appeared gradually. The houses grew larger, set back from the road behind landscaped lawns. Streets widened. Streetlights became fewer but brighter. Trees were taller, older, the kind that took decades to grow and money to maintain. The geography of wealth. 30 minutes from my world to Bradford's. 30 minutes and $1,000. Traffic was light. Saturday evening, most people already where they needed to be. I drove. The speed limit stayed in the right lane, listened to the sound of the tires on pavement, and the quiet hum of the engine. The GPS on my phone said 15 minutes to destination. I thought about what Bradford was planning, the questions about my finances, the important family meeting, the paperwork Isabel had overheard. He thought he had me figured out. Thought he knew exactly what I was worth. Exactly how vulnerable I was, exactly how this evening would go. He was wrong on every count. Tonight, Bradford would learn that the geography of wealth wasn't about where you lived or what you drove or how you dressed. It was about what you built, what you protected, and what you were willing to reveal. When the time came, the GPS announced, in 5 miles, take exit 339 toward Bryn Mawr. I checked the clock. 6:55, right on time. Tonight, Bradford would learn that 30 minutes wasn't as far as he thought. That his world and mine weren't so separate after all. That the old man in the Honda was more than he appeared. Tonight, everything might change. 1240 County Line Road. Bradford's mansion rose before me. Stone and glass circular driveway exterior lighting that cost more than most cars. I pulled in slowly, tires crunching on the pristine pavement. The house sat back from the road like it was too good to be seen from street level. 3 stories, maybe 8,000 square-ft columns, flanking the entrance that served no structural purpose except to say money lives here. Vivian's Subaru was already parked in the driveway, tucked near the side entrance. She'd arrived before me. Probably wanted a moment to prepare herself. Or maybe Bradford had called her early to help with something. Either way, she was already inside. I parked my Honda between Bradford's black Mercedes and Randall's silver BMW. The contrast wasn't lost on me. My 12-year-old Accord with its duct-taped mirror sitting between two vehicles that cost more than I'd paid for my house in 1978. Bradford would appreciate the symbolism. He always did. Through the tall windows flanking the front door, I could see figures moving inside. Bradford, recognizable by his height, and the way he gestured when he talked. Randall shorter, stockier, and another man's suit briefcase the unmistakable posture of someone who billed by the hour. A lawyer. The dining room was visible through another set of windows. Table set for 8 place settings that probably cost more per plate than my monthly grocery budget. And there beside Bradford's chair at the head of the table, a leather briefcase closed but conspicuous. I sat in the car for a moment longer, engine still running, heat blowing against the December cold. This was it. The moment I could still back out if I wanted to drive back to Kensington. Text Vivian an excuse, let Bradford's plans play out some other way on some other night. But Ruth's voice came to me again. Take care of them. I turned off the engine. The front door opened before I reached it. Isabel stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm interior lights. She stepped out onto the stone landing and met me halfway, wrapping her arms around me in a hug that felt protective rather than greeting. Grandpa, she whispered against my shoulder. There are 3 lawyers inside, or at least one I recognize. Dad's attorney, David Peaton. Thanks for the warning, I said quietly. She pulled back, looked at me with Ruth's eyes, the same shade of brown, the same way of seeing through pretense straight to truth. I'll sit next to you at dinner. I'd like that. She took my arm and we walked to the door together, 26 years old, and already understanding that sometimes the best thing you can do is just stand beside someone. Inside, the house announced itself. Marble foyer, black and white, checkered like a chessboard. High ceilings that made voices echo. A chandelier that probably required a crane to install. Original artwork on the walls. Not prints, but paintings with visible brush strokes and gallery tags still attached to the frames. This was the house Bradford had bought to prove something to himself, to the world, to anyone who'd grown up in Kensington and needed reminding of what success looked like. Vivian appeared from the hallway, saw me, and her whole face changed relief mixed with worry. She crossed the foyer quickly and hugged me. Dad, I'm glad you're here. Her eyes said what her mouth didn't. I'm sorry for whatever's about to happen. Wouldn't miss it? I said. Bradford emerged from what looked like a study doorway, flanked by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes that had probably never been opened. He wore a suit that cost more than my car's blue, book-value charcoal gray, tailored to fit perfectly, tie knotted with precision. His smile spread across his face like butter on warm bread. Harold, so glad you could make it. Big night tonight? He crossed the foyer with his hand extended. I took it. His grip was too firm, held too long, squeezed just hard enough to make a point without being obvious about it. The handshake of a man who needed you to know he was in control. Appreciate the invitation, I said. Come, let me introduce everyone. He kept his hand on my shoulder as he steered me deeper into the house. You know Randall, of course. Randall stood near the dining room entrance, drink already in hand. He nodded, raised his glass slightly. Harold, good to see you. And this Bradford continued gesturing toward a man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive watch. Is David Peaton my attorney? He's here just as well. We'll get to that. Peaton extended his hand. Professional smile, eyes that evaluated. Mr. Sutton, pleasure. Likewise, I said. The unspoken question hung in the air. Why did a family dinner need a lawyer? Bradford's smile widened. Shall we move to the dining room? Everyone's here now. We crossed into the dining room, and I took it all in with a glance. The table was set with precision, 8 places each, with multiple forks, knives, arranged by size wine glasses, catching the light from another chandelier overhead. Crystal silver plates with gold trim. Dawson was already seated near the far-end phone in hand, scrolling through something that apparently couldn't wait. He looked up as we entered, saw me, gave a curt nod. No smile, just acknowledgement that I existed, and he'd rather I didn't. Isabel squeezed my arm and guided me to a seat. She'd positioned herself so I'd be between her and Vivian, both of them flanking me like guards. Bradford took his place at the head of the table. Randall sat to his right. Peyton, the lawyer, took a seat at the far end near Dawson. The briefcase sat beside Bradford's chair leather, gleaming under the light latches closed but ready like a coiled snake, I thought, waiting. I glanced at the clock on the wall. Exactly 7:00 p.m. Bradford raised his wine glass. To family, he said, and to the important decisions we make together. Everyone lifted their glasses. I lifted mine too, but didn't drink. The game had begun. Bradford raised his wine glass higher, making sure everyone's attention was on him. To family, he said, and to the decisions we make together. Everyone lifted their glasses. I lifted mine too, but kept my eyes on Bradford over the rim. Watched him watch the room, making sure his moment landed the way he wanted. We drank. The wine was expensive. I could tell by the weight of it, the way it clung to the glass. Probably cost more per bottle than I spent on groceries in a month. Introductions were complete. Everyone had found their positions. I sat between Isabel on my left and Vivian on my right. Both of them close enough that I could feel their presence like bookends. Across from me, Bradford. At the head of the table, Randall to his right. Dawson beside Randall, scrolling his phone, until Bradford shot him a look that made him put it away. At the far end, David Peyton, the lawyer, sat with a leather notepad open in front of him, expensive pen already in hand. Taking notes at a family dinner, the wrongness of it hung in the air like smoke. The first course arrived. A woman in her 30s, professional, efficient eyes that didn't quite meet anyone's, brought out bowls of French onion soup. She moved with the practiced silence of someone used to being invisible. "Danielle," Bradford said as she set down his bowl. "This is from Chef Marcel, correct?" "Yes, Mr. Whitmore," she said quietly. Danielle Sanders, I'd later learn. Bradford's assistant pressed into service for the evening. "Miss Labernon just for tonight?" Bradford announced to the table, making sure we all understood the expense. I wanted tonight to be special. Danielle finished serving and disappeared back toward the kitchen, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Bradford picked up his spoon, which was apparently the signal that everyone else could begin. "Tonight is special," he continued. "We're here to discuss family legacy, the future of Whitmore Development Group, and most importantly, how we take care of each other." Randall nodded, lifting his own spoon, making sure everyone is secure and protected. Dawson smirked, shot a glance at me. The look said, "This is about you, old man." I ate my soup, slowly tasted expensive cheese, probably cost $40 a pound, bread made from scratch. I focused on the flavors while my mind focused on the room. Bradford was performing every gesture, calculated every word chosen for effect. "The company's been in our family for 40 years, Bradford said between spoonfuls. "Built by our father, expanded by me. It's about succession now, planning responsibility." He let that word responsibility hang in the air. "We're also discussing," he continued, setting down his spoon and leaning forward slightly, "family support structures, making sure our elders are comfortable. Elders singular. Really, I was the only elder present." Vivian shifted in her seat. I could feel her discomfort radiating outward under the table. Isabel's hand found mine briefly. Just a squeeze, quick, reassuring. "We're here." It said, "You're not alone." Peyton, the lawyer, was taking notes. I watched his pen move across the page. Why did a family dinner about legacy need a lawyer taking notes? Bradford continued his performance. Which brings me to something I've been thinking about, Harold. He turned his attention fully to me. You've been retired, 9 years now since Ruth passed? I said 9 years this March. Must be hard. Bradford's voice carried just the right amount of sympathy. Practiced sympathy. The kind you learn in business school when they teach you how to fire people. Living on Social Security pension. Kensington's getting expensive with all the gentrification. There it was, the first move. Establishing that I was struggling, that I needed help, that my financial situation was precarious. I manage, I said. Of course you do. Bradford smiled. You've always been practical, always made do with what you had. Made do. Like poverty was a virtue instead of a circumstance. That row house of yours, Randall added as if on cue. How long have you been there? Must be 40 years or more. 47, I said. Bought it in 1978. Remarkable, Bradford said. Same house, same car. What is it, 12 years on that Honda now? You're a man of consistency, Harold. Consistency. Another word that sounded like praise but meant something else. Meant you're stuck. Meant you can't afford anything better. Dawson had given up pretending not to listen. He was watching me now with open curiosity, probably wondering why we were talking about his grandfather's car at a dinner that was supposed to be about company legacy. The soup bowls were cleared. Danielle reappeared with another woman I didn't recognize, both moving efficiently to remove plates and reset silverware. The second course appeared some kind of fish garnished with herbs I couldn't name, sauce that probably had a French name nobody could pronounce. Bradford waited until everyone was served, waited until the servers had retreated, waited for maximum effect. Then his smile widened. Which is why I have a proposal, he said. Something that benefits everyone. He paused. Let the moment stretch. Let anticipation build. The briefcase beside his chair seemed to grow larger, more present, more threatening. Isabel's hand found mine again under the table. This time she held on. Vivian had stopped eating entirely. She was staring at her plate, like she could read the future in the pattern of the sauce. Bradford's smile stayed fixed. Harold, he said, I'd like to offer you something, an opportunity. The room went quiet. Even Dawson stopped moving. I set down my fork carefully, looked at Bradford across the table, waited. He was enjoying this. The power of the pause, the control of the moment. But first he said, reaching toward the briefcase. Let me explain what I have in mind. Bradford leaned forward, hands clasped together on the table like he was about to deliver good news. Harold, I'd like to offer you a position at Whitmore Development Group. I set down my fork carefully. The fish on my plate was half-eaten, expensive, and tasteless. I looked at Bradford and waited. Facilities consultant. He said the words rolling out smooth and rehearsed. Part-time, $35,000 per year. He let that number sit in the air. To him, it probably sounded generous. To me, it sounded like exactly what it was, a salary designed to make me feel dependent, leered. The role would involve oversight of maintenance contracts. Bradford continued gesturing with one hand like he was painting a picture. Vendor relations, quality control on our properties. Perfect for someone with your background in logistics. My background, he made 40 years of work sound quaint, decorative benefits. Included, of course, Bradford added, health insurance, retirement planning assistance, retirement planning for someone who'd been retired 9 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was making it sound helpful, generous, like he was throwing a lifeline to a drowning man. And maybe to everyone else at the table, that's exactly what it looked like. The subtext was clear. Harold needs money. This is charity dressed up as opportunity. Randall jumped in right on cue. Great opportunity, actually. He took a sip of wine, nodded like he'd been part of planning this. A lot of people would love a position like this at your age. At your age. There it was, again. The constant reminder that I was old, that I should be grateful, that someone offering me $35,000 a year was doing me a favor. Dawson nodded to the motion mechanical, following his father's lead. Yeah, pretty solid offer. Bradford wasn't done. And of course, we'd help with any healthcare costs, medical needs as you get older. Things come up, we want to make sure you're covered. As you get older, like I wasn't already 74, like the getting older was something that hadn't happened yet. Vivian was staring at her plate. I could see her jaw working tension in the way she held her fork. She knew what this was. She was just trapped in the middle of it. I took a sip of water, gave myself a second to think. The water was cold filtered, probably from some special system that cost $5,000 to install. That's very generous, Bradford, I said. His face brightened. He thought he'd won. I think so too. Family takes care of family, right? Right, I said. But I'm retired. Happy in retirement. The brightness dimmed slightly. His smile tightened at the edges. Well, we all need income security, especially at 74. Especially at 74. He wouldn't let that go. I appreciate the thought, I said, but I'm comfortable. Bradford's eyes flicked to Peyton, just a glance quick enough that most people wouldn't notice, but I noticed. The lawyer made a small notation on his pad. Mental note, subject declined job offer. Note that for the record. Comfortable. Bradford repeated like he was tasting the word and finding it suspicious. In that row house in Kensington, 1,400 square FT must be tight. It's enough, I said. But you drive that old Honda. His voice carried just a hint of concern, perfectly calibrated. What is it, 12 years old now? 12. So I confirmed. Runs fine, of course. Bradford's smile was all patronizing sympathy. Now you're a practical man, always have been. But Harold, there are better options for someone your age. Safer options. Safer options. Translation. You can't take care of yourself anymore. You need someone to make decisions for you. The implication hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Everyone at the table could feel it, the shift in tone, the tightening of the conversation around me like a noose. Isabel couldn't stay quiet anymore. Grandpa's house is perfect, she said, voice firm despite her youth. I love visiting there. It's home. Bradford's head snapped toward her. Isabel. His voice was sharp cutting. Adults are talking. She flinched but didn't look away from him. 26 years old and still learning how to stand up to her father, but trying anyway. The table went quiet, awkward silence where people pretended to be very interested in their food. I reached over under the table and squeezed Isabel's hand once. Thank you, it meant. But also, it's okay. I've got this. Bradford cleared his throat, regaining control of the room. As I was saying, the job offer stands. Think about it, no pressure. But there was pressure. That was the whole point. Create the offer, establish that I needed it, then move to whatever came next. John, but the job isn't the only matter tonight. Bradford's voice shifted again, dropping lower, more serious. This was the pivot, the transition to Act 2. He reached for the briefcase beside his chair. The latches clicked open, sharp sounds in the quiet room. There's something else, Bradford said, lifting the lid. Something important. Papers appeared. Not just a few sheets, but a stack of them. Official-looking documents with tabs sticking out, marked with colored flags, yellow, blue, pink, professional, prepared, rehearsed. Bradford lifted the stack out and set it on the table between us. The thud of paper hitting wood felt heavier than it should have. This is about protection, Harold. He spread his hands over the documents like a dealer showing cards. Your protection. Peyton leaned forward slightly, pen ready. Randall shifted in his seat, suddenly very interested. Dawson actually put his phone down completely. Vivian had gone pale. She knew. Somehow she knew what was coming. Isabel's hand found mine again under the table and held on tight. Bradford's smile was gentle now, concerned. the smile of someone who cared deeply about your well-being. "We've prepared some documents for you," he said. "Standard protection forms for your safety and security." He slid the first document toward me across the polished wood. "Let me explain," Bradford said. Bradford spread the documents across the table like a dealer showing cards. Legal papers, dense text, signature lines highlighted in yellow that caught the chandelier light. Peyton the lawyer spoke first, his voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone who'd explained documents 1,000 times before. "These are standard protection documents, Mr. Sutton. For your benefit, for my benefit." People always said that when they wanted something that benefited them. He slid the first document toward me. I could read the header: medical power of attorney. "This designates someone to make health care decisions if you're unable to," Peyton explained. "Standard practice for anyone over 70. Ensures continuity of care in case of emergency." I looked at the document. Bradford's name filled the designated agent line. "I can make my own decisions," I said. Bradford leaned forward, voice gentle and concerned. "Of course you can, Harold, now. But what if something happens? A stroke, dementia, an accident. We need to be prepared." Prepared, making the trap sound like wisdom. The second document appeared before I could respond. Financial power of attorney. "This allows your designated agent to manage finances, pay bills, handle accounts," Peyton said. "Standard elder care planning protects your assets." Bradford named his agent again, effective immediately upon signing. No waiting period, no review, just sign, and Bradford controls everything. I scanned the text. Legal language, dense paragraphs, but clear enough. Whoever held this could sell property, close accounts, make investments, full authority. The third document landed with more care. Peyton handled it like it was fragile. Healthcare directive and living arrangement consultation. He said this outlines preferences for long-term care should you need assisted living or memory care. Memory care. The euphemism hung in the air. Translation: if we decide you're not competent anymore? I saw the language about appropriate care facilities and agent discretion. Saw what it meant Bradford could put me in a nursing home whenever he decided. "Vivian couldn't stay quiet. Bradford, we talked about this." "We talked?" Her voice was tight. "You said we'd discuss it as a family first." "We are discussing it, Vivian." Bradford didn't look at her. "Right now, that's what tonight is." His tone made it clear her input wasn't required. Randall jumped in, playing his part. "It really is for the best. Our father had similar arrangements, made everything smoother." Dawson nodded, trying to look wise. "Yeah, Grandpa. It's just paperwork. Makes everything easier." Easier for whom I picked up the medical POA and started reading. Actually reading, not skimming. Peyton shifted in his seat. Bradford's smile tightened. They wanted me to just sign. Page 2, Section 3. Incapacity may be determined by agent's designated physician based on medical consultation and observation. Agent's designated physician. Bradford's doctor. One doctor chosen by Bradford could declare me incompetent. No second opinion required, no family input needed. I set that down and picked up the financial POA. Page 3, Section 4B. Agent is authorized to sell, transfer, or liquidate principal's real property and personal assets as agent deems necessary for principal's care. Bradford decides what's necessary. Bradford could sell my house the day after I signed. Could empty whatever accounts he thought I had, do whatever he wanted. The living arrangement document was worse. Full authority to relocate me to appropriate care facilities with no appeals, no family consultation. Bradford decides I need a nursing home, and that's where I go. I looked up. Peyton was watching carefully. Bradford was trying to maintain his concerned expression, but impatience was creeping in. "Everything in order?" Bradford asked. These are interesting documents, I said. Standard forms, I assure you. Peyton's pen had stopped moving with some non-standard clauses, I said. Bradford's jaw tightened slightly. I flipped to the signature pages. Everything was already filled in except my signature. Dates December 7th, 2024. Witness lines prepared for David Peyton and Randall Whitmore. Even the notary section ready. This had been prepared in advance. They'd expected me to sign tonight, expected me to be grateful, expected me to trust. I saw the full picture now. Sign these papers. Bradford's doctor declares me incompetent. One opinion, no appeal. Bradford sells the house worth $180,000 now, puts me in a cheap Medicaid nursing home, maybe $2,500 a month, pockets the rest. Even the $100,000 Bradford thought I had in savings would disappear into his control. A trap designed for a poor old man who couldn't take care of himself anymore. Bradford had provided the pen, gold-plated, heavy, expensive, the kind you use for important documents. I picked it up, felt the weight of it. Bradford's smile widened. He thought I was about to sign. I looked at the pen, then at Bradford, then I set it down. I'd like to read these more carefully first, I said. All of them, thoroughly. Bradford's smile froze in place. Of course, he said, voice still smooth but with an edge underneath. Take your time. We have all night. But his tone said something different. Said this wasn't the plan. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. Peyton closed his notepad. Randall took a long drink of wine. Dawson picked up his phone again. The room had shifted. The momentum Bradford built was stalling. Vivian let out a breath she'd been holding. Isabel's hand found mine under the table and squeezed. I pulled the documents closer and kept reading. Every clause, every section, every piece of fine print Bradford hoped I'd ignore. Because now I understood what this was. Not protection, not clears throat care, not family looking out for family. This was a trap, and Bradford had just shown me exactly how it worked. I read slowly, methodically. Let the silence in the room stretch and deepen while everyone watched. Minutes passed. Bradford shifted in his seat. Randall refilled his wine glass. Peyton's pen stayed still on his notepad. Dawson looked up from his phone, curious about the delay. I was on page 3 of the Medical Power of Attorney when I found it. Buried in Section 3, subsection C in language designed to look routine. Incapacity may be determined by agent's designated physician based on medical consultation, observation, and professional judgment. No additional medical opinion shall be required for determination to be binding. I read it twice to make sure I understood. Agent's designated physician. Bradford picks the doctor that doctor examines me or doesn't just observes and declares me incompetent based on professional judgment, whatever that meant. However Bradford wanted to define it, no second opinion required, no family consultation, no appeal process. One doctor chosen by Bradford could end my independence with a signature on a form. I set that document down and picked up the financial power of attorney again. Found what I was looking for on page 3, section 4B. Agent is authorized to sell, transfer, or liquidate principal's real property and personal assets as agent deems necessary for principal's care and maintenance. Effective immediately upon execution of this document. Effective immediately. The moment I signed, Bradford could start selling my house, my car, anything he thought I owned, whatever he deemed necessary for my care. He'd be the one deciding what was necessary. Of course, the living arrangement document was the final piece. Section 2. Agent may relocate principal to appropriate care facility deemed necessary by agent based on principal's medical condition, living circumstances, and care requirements. Principal's consent shall not be required for such relocation. Agent decides. Agent relocates. Principal me doesn't get a say. I looked up from the papers. The full picture was clear now. The trap worked like this. I signed these documents tonight. Within a few weeks, maybe days, Bradford arranges a medical evaluation with a doctor he's already chosen. That doctor finds surprised that I'm experiencing cognitive decline, memory issues, confusion, whatever language makes it official. Bradford, now holding medical POA, agrees with the doctor's assessment, declares me incapacitated. Then, holding financial POA, he sells my house. The row house worth $180,000, now maybe more. With Kensington gentrification, he tells anyone who asks that the sale is necessary for my care. Nobody can challenge it. The POA gives him that authority. He relocates me to an appropriate care facility, translation the cheapest nursing home he can find, that accepts Medicaid. Maybe $2,500 a month, maybe less if he really shops around. The math was simple. Sell the house for $180,000. Pay maybe $30,000 a year for cheap nursing care? Even if I lived another 10 years, that's only $300,000 total cost. Bradford pockets whatever's left. Probably finds a way to build the estate for his management services too. And the $100,000 in savings he thought I had that disappears into care costs that Bradford controls, and I can never audit. It was elegant, really legal, documented, witnessed by a lawyer, all wrapped up as protection, and family taking care of family. Bradford was watching me, trying to read my expression. Everything in order, Harold. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Saw the calculation behind his concerned expression, the impatience he was trying to hide. These are interesting documents, I said. Peyton cleared his throat. Oh, standard forms, I assure you, Mr. Sutton. Used in estate planning across the country, with some non-standard clauses, I said. Peyton's professional mask slipped slightly. Bradford's jaw tightened. Vivian was watching me with her mother's eyes, worried, scared, but also something else. A spark of hope, maybe like she wanted me to see what she'd been seeing for years. Isabel's hand was still holding mine under the table. Her grip had gotten tighter. I set the documents down in a neat stack. All three of them aligned the edges carefully. Took my time. Before we discuss these, I said, my voice calm and measured, I'm curious about something else. Bradford leaned back slightly, trying to regain his casual confidence. What's that? Before we discuss arrangements for me, I said I'd like to understand your arrangements. Mine? Bradford's eyebrows went up. Confusion, or maybe the beginning of concern. Your company, I said. Whitmore Development Group. Tell me about it. The question landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water ripples spreading outward. Bradford blinked, thrown off script. What do you mean you know what I do? Humor me, I said. The words came out gentle, patient, like I was asking about the weather. Who owns Whitmore Development Group? The room shifted. The air changed. This wasn't the question they'd expected. This wasn't part of Bradford's plan. Bradford's irritation broke through the polished surface. I own it. Well, the family owns it. Why does this matter? The question hung between us. Everyone at the table was watching now. Even Dawson had put his phone down. What percentage do you own? I asked. Bradford exhaled through his nose. I own 35%, my largest stake. He spread his hands like this should be obvious. I don't see what this has to do with your documents and the rest various investors. His voice was getting tighter. Harold, we were discussing your protection. Who's your largest investor? I asked. Bradford's jaw worked. He looked at Randall, then back at me. Riverside Holdings, LLC. They're on the board. They've been with us since. He paused, calculating. 2005. Since 2005, I repeated. And what percentage does Riverside Holdings own? Randall answered before Bradford could. About 47% last I checked. Actually, I said 51.3%. The silence that followed was complete. No one moved. No one breathed. Bradford stared at me across the table. How would you know that? Because I pay attention, I said. His face flushed color rising from his collar. You don't even work in real estate. You were in logistics at a shipyard. Each word came out clipped. How would you possibly know the exact ownership percentage of my investors? Good question. I let it hang there for a moment while I pulled out my phone. Well, that's a fair question, I said. Tell me, Bradford, in 20 years, have you ever met the beneficial owner of Riverside Holdings? Bradford blinked. The question threw him. I've met Martin Gallagher. He represents them at board meetings every quarter, for he trailed off doing the math. 20 years represents them, I said. Exactly. What are you getting at? Bradford's patience was gone. What does any of this have to do with... I unlocked my phone with my thumb, opened my email, found the one I'd prepared this afternoon after talking with Martin. This came through this morning, I said. From Riverside Holdings Registered Agent Annual Beneficial Ownership Disclosure. I slid the phone across the polished table toward Bradford. He stared at it like it might explode, then picked it up with careful fingers. I watched his face as he read, watched the color drain from tan to pale to something closer to gray, watched his eyes move across the screen twice, like he was trying to make the words say something different. The email was simple. Subject line, in bold, Riverside Holdings, LLC Beneficial Ownership Statement, body text, even simpler. Riverside Holdings, LLC managed by Sutton Family Trust. Beneficial owner Harold Sutton, trustee Martin Gallagher, pursuant to Delaware Code Title 6, Section 18305. It went on filed with the Delaware Secretary of State. Ownership percentage, 51.3% of Whitmore Development Group. Corporate structure documentation. Trust establishment date 1985. Bradford's lips moved as he read. No sound came out. This is he looked up at me. His face had lost all its confidence, all its control. What is this? Vivian leaned over to see the phone in Bradford's hand. I watched her face as understanding hit. Her mouth fell open. Her hand went to her throat like she couldn't breathe. That the word came out barely above a whisper. Isabel's grip on my hand had gone slack with shock. She was staring at me with Ruth's eyes wide, disbelieving, trying to process something that didn't make sense with everything she thought she knew. Randall reached across the table and took the phone from Bradford's frozen fingers. Read it himself. His expression went carefully blank. The lawyer in him taking over, shutting down visible reaction. But I could see his mind working, calculating, understanding exactly what this meant. Peyton closed his notepad. Slowly, deliberately, the sound of the cover meeting the pages was loud in the quiet room. He set his expensive pen down beside it and didn't say a word. Professional instinct probably screaming at him that this dinner had become something he shouldn't be part of. Dawson leaned forward, confused. What does it say? Someone tell me. Quiet, Bradford said. His voice was hollow. He was still staring at me, trying to reconcile what he just read with the man sitting across from him. The old man in the simple button-down shirt? The man who drove a 12-year-old Honda? The man he just tried to trap with power of attorney documents. You Bradford's voice cracked slightly. You own Riverside. I own what Riverside owns, I said. My voice stayed calm. Level like we were discussing something ordinary through the Sutton Family Trust. Martin Gallagher serves as trustee, has for 40 years. I'm the beneficial owner. The words landed like stones dropping into deep water. That means Bradford couldn't finish. His brain was trying to catch up, trying to make sense of impossible information. That means I own 51.3% of Whitmore Development Group. I said controlling interest in the company you think you run. The percentage hung in the air. Not 49%, not a minority stake. Control? Vivian had both hands over her mouth now. Tears were forming in her eyes, but not falling. She was looking at me like I was a stranger, like she'd never known me at all. But your Bradford gestured at me at everything I represented in his world? You live in a row house. You drive that car. You shop at discount stores. You're poor. He couldn't say it out loud, couldn't make himself speak the word, but we all knew what he meant. I do, I said. All of those things are true. This is insane. Bradford stood up his chair, scraped loudly against the floor. This is impossible. You're showing me some fake email, It's not fake, I said quietly. Then prove it. Bradford's voice was rising, desperation creeping in around the edges. You can't just show me a Martin, I said, looking toward the dining room entrance. You can come in now. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Everyone looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Then footsteps sounded from the foyer. Steady, unhurried, confident. Martin Gallagher walked into the dining room carrying his leather briefcase, 67 years old, and every inch of him solid, real, undeniable. Bradford's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Martin set the briefcase on the empty chair beside me, looked at Bradford with the patient calm of someone who'd sat through 1,000 difficult meetings and knew exactly how to handle them. Martin Gallagher, he said, trustee of the Sutton Family Trust. He paused. We've met many times, Mr. Whitmore. Board meetings, quarterly reviews, 40 times over 20 years. I've been attending on behalf of Riverside Holdings since 2005. Bradford's face went from gray to white, from white to something with no color at all. Your recognition was flooding in horror with it. You're the investor, the board member, but you said you represented. I do represent. Martin said, I represent Harold as trustee. That's what trustees do. I vote his shares, sign his documents, attend meetings in his stead, all with his authorization, all legal, all documented. He tapped the briefcase. 20 years of documentation. Every board meeting, every vote, every capital injection, every signature, all here. Bradford looked at me, at Martin, back at me. The whole time, he whispered. You've been the whole time. Yes, I said. Martin opened the briefcase. Bradford stood from his chair at the head of the table. What the hell? Good evening, everyone. Martin's voice was calm, professional. The voice of someone who'd sat through 1,000 difficult meetings and never lost his composure. Bradford's face went from tan to pale. Who are you? Martin Gallagher, trustee for the Sutton Family Trust. Martin set his briefcase on the sideboard, clicked it open. We've met many times, Mr. Whitmore. Board meetings, quarterly reviews. He pulled out a stack of folders, each one labeled and dated. 40 times over the past 20 years, to be precise. Bradford stared, his mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came. Randall leaned forward. Your Riverside Holdings. I represent Riverside Holdings. Martin began laying folders on the table one by one, which is owned by the Sutton Family Trust, which I manage on behalf of the beneficial owner. He glanced at Harold. Your father-in-law. Vivian's hand went to her mouth. Isabel gripped the edge of the table. Bradford found his voice. It came out strangled. That's impossible. It's documented. Martin opened the first folder. December 2005. Markham Project 4.2 PEM Waters over budget. Emergency board meeting. UDG needed $8,000 or the project would collapse and the company would default on its construction loans. He slid a document across the table. Board minutes. Martin's signature at the bottom. The board voted to accept a capital injection from Riverside Holdings, LLC, in exchange for equity. I voted yes on behalf of Riverside. The funds were wired the next day. Martin tapped the page. Riverside's ownership increased to 20%. Bradford's hands were shaking. He reached for the document, couldn't quite grasp it. Martin opened the second folder, March 2008 financial crisis, banks calling loans. WDG needed $15,000 to cover obligations or face bankruptcy. Another document, another vote, another wire transfer. Riverside provided the capital. The board voted to approve. I voted yes. Martin's voice never changed, calm, factual. Riverside's ownership increased to 35%. Peyton, the lawyer, had gone very still. His notepad sat closed in front of him. June 2012. Martin opened the third folder. Mississauga expansion cost overruns. WDG needed $12,000. Riverside provided it. The board approved. I voted yes. Riverside's ownership increased to 45%. Bradford was staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. Those were investments, standard capital raises. They were bailouts. Harold's voice was quiet, every single one. Martin opened the fourth folder. His voice softened slightly. April 2015, the lawsuit settlement. WDG needed $8,000 immediately or face a judgment that would have triggered cross-default clauses in every loan you had. He paused. That was 3 weeks after Ruth died. Vivian made a small sound. Isabel's eyes filled with tears. The board met. I voted yes on behalf of Riverside. We wired the funds the next morning. Martin slid the document to Bradford. Yeah. Riverside's ownership increased to 51.3%. Controlling interest. The room was completely silent. Bradford picked up the paper with trembling hands, stared at the vote tally, the wire confirmation, his own signature at the bottom, acknowledging receipt of funds. And from 2016 to now, Martin opened the fifth folder. It was thicker than the others. Quarterly capital injections to cover operating losses. Some quarters, $1,000. Some quarters, $2,000, 1,000 dotellers. Last quarter, two $200,000 colors. He spread the documents across the table. Dozens of them, each one showing a board vote, a capital injection. Martin's signature approving funds on behalf of Riverside Holdings. Total, from 2016 to present 47 Fête. Martin looked at Bradford. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. Total capital invested by Riverside Holdings from 2005 to present 90,000 doodlers. Dawson was staring at his father. Dad. Randall had gone completely blank. Bradford's voice came out. I've been representing Harold Sutton's interests for 40 years. Martin closed his briefcase. The Sutton Family Trust was established in 1985. I was named trustee. Harold is the beneficial owner. Every share Riverside Holdings owns, Harold owns. Every vote I cast, Harold authorized. Every dollar I invested came from his accounts. He turned to Harold. I believe that covers the documentation. Harold nodded once. Bradford was shaking his head slowly, like he could make this not be true if he just refused to accept it. You can't. It's all legal. Martin's tone was matter of fact, filed with the Delaware Secretary of State. Every board vote is in the minutes. Every wire transfer has a receipt. Every share certificate is recorded. He gestured to the folders. You're welcome to review everything. Your lawyer certainly should. Peyton didn't move, didn't reach for the documents. Just sat very still, understanding that whatever plan he'd helped craft tonight had just collapsed. Isabel was the first to speak. Her voice was small. Grandpa, you've been this whole time. Harold met her eyes. This whole time, sweetheart. Vivian was crying now. Silent tears running down her face. Not sad tears, something else. Relief maybe, or recognition of something she'd suspected but never dared to believe. Bradford pushed back from the table, stood. His face had gone from pale to gray. I need to... He couldn't finish the sentence. Martin picked up his briefcase. The documents are yours to keep. I have copies. He looked at Harold. I'll be outside if you need me. 15 minutes away, just like we planned. He walked to the door, opened it. then paused and looked back at Bradford. "One more thing, Mr. Whitmore. Every board meeting I attended, every vote I cast, every decision I made, you were sitting right there. You saw me. You shook my hand. You thanked me for Riverside's continued support." His voice was quiet. "You just never thought to ask who I really worked for." Martin stepped outside and closed the door softly behind him. The silence in the dining room was deafening. Bradford stood frozen at the head of the table, one hand braced against his chair. The documents Martin had left behind were spread across the mahogany surface like evidence at a crime scene. 20 years of board votes, 20 years of capital injections, 20 years of Harold Sutton quietly keeping Bradford Whitmore's company. And Bradford Whitmore's life from falling apart. And Bradford had never known. Harold Clear's throat sat very still watching his son-in-law process what had just happened. Watching the man who tried to trap him tonight realized he'd been living inside someone else's trap for 2 decades. Watching the exact moment Bradford understood that the power he thought he had never existed at all. Martin wasn't finished. He stood at the sideboard, one hand resting on the open briefcase. "Every board meeting, every vote, every signature, I was there." His voice was calm, factual, the voice of someone presenting evidence that couldn't be disputed. 40 board meetings, over 20 years, roughly 2 per year. Some years more when crisis required it, some years fewer when things were stable. He gestured to the document spread across the table. "I voted Harold's 51.3% every single time, approved every major decision, expansions, hires, contracts, acquisitions." Bradford was staring at the papers like they were written in a language he'd never learned. "I signed documents on behalf of the Sutton Family Trust, authorized wire transfers, negotiated terms when necessary." Martin's tone never changed, and "I never once disclosed the identity of the beneficial owner. Delaware law protected that. The trust structure protected that." He looked at Bradford. "You never asked. In 20 years, you never once asked who I really represented." Harold's voice cut through the silence. "The company has posted losses in 6 of the last 8 quarters." Martin nodded, pushed the quarterly reports forward. Harold continued. "Operating margins compressed. Revenue down 18% year over year. Cash reserves depleted." His voice was quiet, clinical. "The Wilmington Project. It's $22 million over budget. Did you know that Bradford's voice came out thin? We're handling it. You're handling it with my money." Harold's eyes didn't leave Bradford's face. "I covered the shortfall last month through Riverside." Martin pulled out another document. "Emergency wire transfer $3 million November 15th. Bradford's hands were shaking. "Without that $90 million over the past 20 years, Harold said quietly, where would Whitmore Development Group be right now?" Bradford didn't answer, couldn't answer. Harold answered for him. "Bankrupt. 2008 would have finished you. 2012 should have been the end. 2015 certainly would have been." He paused. "Let that sink in. Every time I stepped in, every time Martin voted to approve the capital injection, every time Bradford Whitmore thanked Riverside Holdings for their continued faith in the company's vision, Randall found his voice. It came out horsaro. We didn't know. We thought Riverside was just an investment group. That was the point." Harold's tone was matter of fact. Vivian's voice broke through. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" Harold turned to his daughter. His expression softened. "Because I wanted you to choose your own life, sweetheart, your own path. Not to be controlled by money, not to have people treat you differently because of what I have." Vivan was crying openly now. "But you let him treat you like I was nothing." Harold nodded. "Yes. I watched for 24 years. He looked back at Bradford. "I watched how you talked to Vivan, how you dismissed her concerns, how you made her feel small." His voice was still quiet, still controlled. But I watched how you treated my grandchildren, how you used them, Isabel, for appearances, Dawson, as an extension of yourself. Isabel was gripping the edge of the table. Her face was pale. Through I watched you at Ruth's funeral. Harold continued complaining about traffic while my wife lay in the ground. I watched you at board meetings making decisions with my money, taking credit for success that wouldn't exist without my capital. Bradford tried to speak. This is insane. You drive a 12-year-old Honda. You live in an old row house in Kensington. I still do. You dress like you. You shop at discount stores. I still do. Then how are you worth? Bradford couldn't finish the sentence. How much am I actually worth? Harold's voice was steady. Martin didn't need to check his notes. Law current portfolio valuation $3.24 billion. The number fell like a bomb. Dawson dropped his fork. It clattered against his plate. The only sound in the room. Randall's mouth had fallen open. Heaton was gathering his papers, moving slowly, carefully, like a man trying not to be noticed as he prepared to leave a disaster. Vivian made a sound, half sob, half laugh. A sound of complete disbelief. 3. Bradford couldn't get the words out. Mining rights, Martin said. Energy investments, real estate holdings across Pennsylvania, Ohio, Delaware. Public equities, private investments. He glanced at the documents. The stake in Whitmore Development Group represents approximately 3% of total assets. Market value $520 million. Bradford's face had gone from gray to white. 520. Everything is documented. Harold's voice cut through Bradford's shock. 20 years of SEC filings, Delaware corporate records, trust documents, everything legal, everything compliant. He leaned forward slightly. Every dollar you've spent building your reputation, your lifestyle, your sense of power, it came from me. Every crisis you survived, every expansion you celebrated, every victory you claimed, I paid for it. The silence was absolute. Harold reached for the power of attorney documents that Bradford had placed in front of him earlier. The documents that would have given Bradford control over Harold's life. He picked up the medical power of attorney, held it up. You thought I was worth maybe $100,000, Social Security and pension. The row house. His voice was calm, almost conversational. You thought you could take control, sell my house, put me in a nursing home, pocket the difference. He set it down, picked up the financial power of attorney. You thought you could manage my money, pay my bills, make my decisions. He looked at the signature page at the line where Bradford had expected him to sign. Effective immediately. You said no waiting period, no safeguards. He set that one down too. Picked up the living arrangement consultation document. You already had a facility picked out, didn't you? Harold's voice was still quiet. Someplace cheap, $2,500 a month. You could sell the house for $180,000. Keep most of it. Use the rest to cover care for a few years. And when that ran out, he shrugged. Medicaid would take over. Bradford's breathing was shallow, fast. You had it all planned. Harold set the last document down. The doctor who would declare me incapacitated, the facility that would take me the account where you'd deposit the proceeds from selling my home. He looked at Bradford. Really looked at him. You were going to erase me, lock me away, make me disappear. Vivian's crying had gone silent, just tears streaming down her face. Isabel was holding her mother's hand now, both of them staring at Bradford like they were seeing him for the first time. Harold leaned back in his chair. Now let's talk about what happens next. Harold sat there, still calm, still in control. You hired a private investigator. Bradford froze. His face went from white to gray. That's not 3 weeks ago. Harold's voice was matter of fact. To investigate my financial situation, he pulled out his phone, opened an email, turned it so everyone could see. The report came back. Harold Sutton, 74 years old, retired logistics worker, residing at 2847 Frankfurt Avenue, Property value approximately $180,000. Vehicle 2012 Honda Accord. Estimated savings $100,000 or less. Income from Social Security. Small pension. Harold set the phone down. That's what you found. That's what you saw. Bradford's mouth opened closed. No words came, and you thought, perfect? Harold's voice was quiet. An old man, vulnerable, alone, no money, nobody to protect him. He gestured to the power of attorney documents. You thought, get him to sign the papers. Medical and financial then declare him incapacitated. Just one note from a cooperative physician. That's all these documents require. Harold pointed to the clause in the medical power of attorney. Then you sell his house $180,000 for that lot. Put him in a Medicaid nursing facility, cost $2,500 a month, pocket the rest. Maybe clear $150,000. He paused. Small money for you. But it wasn't about the money, was it? Bradford said nothing. It was about control. Harold's voice was steady, relentless, about finally putting the old man in his place. After 24 years of having me around, embarrassing you with my working-class background, my old car, my small house, he leaned forward. After 24 years of watching Vivian choose me over you every time it mattered, of watching my grandchildren love me in ways they never loved you, of sitting at family dinners where nobody cared what you thought but everyone listened when I spoke. Vivian's voice broke through, horrified. Bradford, you were really going to. I was trying to help. Bradford's voice cracked. Desperate. He's old. He needs care. Someone has to make decisions for him before something happens. Before something happens. Harold's tone didn't change, or before I could interfere with whatever you're planning next. He gestured to the quarterly reports Martin had left on the table. The company is failing Bradford. 6 of the last 8 quarters in the red. Cash flow negative. The Wilmington project is hemorrhaging money. $22 million over budget and counting. Bradford was shaking his head. We're handling it. We have a plan. Your plan was me. Harold's voice cut through. Get control of what you thought I had. $100,000 in savings. The house. Use that to buy yourself a few more months of pretending everything's fine. He stood up slowly. What was your fee for tonight, Mr. Peaton? Harold looked at the lawyer. For witnessing these documents, for making sure they were legally binding. Peaton's face had gone pale. I should go. You should. Harold's voice was ice. You should go right now, and you should think very carefully about whether you want your name attached to what almost happened here tonight. Peaton stood, grabbed his briefcase, left his notepad on the table. He was out the door in seconds. Harold turned back to Bradford. What you didn't know that Row House sits on a lot worth $180,000, true. But I also own the Sutton Family Trust. That trust owns Riverside Holdings LLC, and that company owns 51.3% of yours. He walked around the table slowly, deliberately. Every board meeting where Martin voted, that was me. Every capital injection that saved your company, that was me. Every successful project you've built over the past 20 years was built with my money. His voice dropped. Quiet, final. You tried to trap me tonight. You tried to take what you thought was mine. You tried to erase me. He stopped directly across from Bradford. But you can't trap someone who's been holding you up for 2 decades. Bradford's voice came out broken. I didn't know. No, you didn't know. Because I didn't want you to know. Isabel's voice was soft. Almost a whisper. Why not Grandpa Harold turned to her? His expression gentled slightly. Because I wanted to see who all of you really were. When money didn't change things, when wealth didn't dictate how you treated each other, or how you treated me. He looked around the table at Vivian, crying at Isabel, holding her mother's hand, at Dawson, staring at his father, at Randall, silent and calculating. I wanted to know if my daughter married a good man, if my grandchildren were being raised with character, if the company I was funding was being run with integrity? He paused. I have my answer now. The silence was absolute. Bradford had both hands on the table, bracing himself. His perfect tan had faded to ash. His perfect life was collapsing around him. What happens now? His voice was barely audible. Harold checked his watch. 7:45. Tomorrow morning, 900 a.m. He paused, looked directly at Bradford. No. Monday morning, 900 a.m. emergency board meeting. Clifford Stevens and the other board members will be present. Martin will be there. I'll be there. He picked up the power of attorney documents, all three of them, tore them in half, set them on the table. You have until then to decide what happens next. Bradford stood too. His voice came out strangled. Decide what? Harold turned back, looked at him directly. I'm giving you two options, Bradford. The room went still. Option A, you resign as CEO Monday morning at the board meeting. You'll take a consulting position. $200,000 per year. Advisory role. You stay on the board as a voting member. You keep your house, your life, and your dignity. I'll appoint a professional CEO, someone who actually knows how to run a profitable company. Harold paused. Let that sink in. Option B. You fight this. You refuse to resign. I make everything public. 20 years of poor financial management, the bailouts, the losses, the fact that without my money, you'd have gone bankrupt 3 times over. The press will love this story. Philadelphia Business Journal. Wall Street Journal CEO rescued by working-class father-in-law he never knew about. Your reputation destroyed your career over, and I still appoint a new CEO because I own 51%. He looked at Bradford, really looked at him. You have until 900 a.m. Monday to decide. Bradford's face flushed red, anger replacing shock. You can't do this. Martin's voice came from the doorway. Calm, factual. He can controlling interest. 51.3%. Harold took a step closer to Bradford. His voice dropped. Quiet, cold. I've watched you treat my daughter like a decoration for 24 years. Watched you treat me like garbage. Watched you build a career on my money while despising where I come from. He gestured to the torn power of attorney documents on the table. Tonight you tried to trap me. You brought your lawyer. You prepared the documents. You planned to control my life, sell my house, put me in a nursing home. His voice hardened. I've seen enough. Bradford was shaking his head. I was trying to help. You're old. I need nothing from you. Harold's tone was ice. What I needed was to see who you really were. And now I know. He turned to Vivian. His expression softened. You can stay or come with me. Your choice. But I'm leaving now. Vivian stood immediately, took Harold's arm. I'm coming with you. Bradford took a step toward her, his voice desperate. Vivian, don't. Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. Just don't say anything else. She looked at her husband, really looked at him. 24 years of marriage, 24 years of choices, 24 years of watching him dismiss her father while taking his money. I need time, she whispered, to figure out what happens next. Bradford's face crumpled. Please no. Vivian's voice was stronger now. Not tonight. Maybe not for a long time. Isabel stood too moved to stand beside her mother and grandfather. I'll walk you out, Grandpa. Dawson's voice came from across the table, small, lost. I'm sorry. The first genuine thing he'd said all evening. Grandpa, I'm really sorry. Harold looked at him. This young man who'd ignored him all night, who'd been raised to value appearances over character, who was just starting to understand what his father had done. It's not too late to be different, Dawson, Harold said quietly. Remember that. Dawson nodded, couldn't speak. Harold, Vivian, and Isabel moved toward the door, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Randall stood abruptly. Harold, wait, please. His voice was urgent, pleading. I'm sorry, I should have stopped him. I saw what he was becoming. I saw how he treated you, how he treated Vivian. I should have said something, done something. Harold paused at the doorway, looked back at Randall. This man who'd been Bradford's right hand for 15 years, who'd sat through every board meeting where Martin voted Harold's shares, who'd watched the company survive crisis after crisis on Harold's money and never questioned where it came from. You had 20 years to stop him, Randall. Harold's voice wasn't angry, just tired, sad. 20 years to be the voice of integrity, to stand up to do the right thing. Randall's shoulders sagged. I know. Now you'll have to live with that. Harold turned away, just like he will. He looked at Bradford one last time. This man who'd married his daughter, who'd given him 2 grandchildren, who'd built a career on capital he never earned, and tried to destroy the man who'd given it to him. Monday morning, 9:00 a.m. Option A or Option B. The only thing I'm not sure about is whether you're smart enough to choose mercy over pride. Bradford stood frozen at the head of the table. His perfect suit, his perfect tan, his perfect life collapsing around him. He opened his mouth, closed it. No words came. Harold stepped outside. Vivian beside him, Isabel following. Martin came last, closing the door softly behind them. Outside, December rain had started, cold, steady, the kind of rain that soaked through expensive coats and 12-year-old jackets the same way. The kind of rain that didn't care about money or status or the difference between Kensington and the main line. Harold stood on the front steps, breathed in the night air, let the rain hit his face. Vivian's voice broke. Dad, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Harold put his arm around her, held her tight. I know, sweetheart. That was the whole point. Behind them, through the tall windows of the mansion, Bradford stood frozen in the dining room, still at the head of the table, surrounded by the documents that had just destroyed his world. 20 years of evidence, 20 years of being saved, 20 years of never knowing who was really in control. Randall stood beside him now, talking, gesturing, probably trying to figure out damage control, trying to find an angle. Dawson sat alone, head in his hands. The dining room that had been set for 8 now held only 3. The others had walked out into the December rain, choosing truth over comfort, choosing family over appearances, choosing the old man in the Honda over the executive in the Mercedes. Harold looked at the mansion one more time. All that glass and stone, all that money on display. Then he turned away, walked to his car. Vivian and Isabel followed. Martin got in his sedan. 3 vehicles pulled away from 1240 County Line Road, headlights cutting through the rain, leaving Bradford behind with his 2 options and 36 hours to decide which kind of man he wanted to be, if it wasn't already too late. Monday morning, December 9th, 2024. 9:00 a.m. sharp. Harold didn't attend the board meeting. He sent Martin as trustee the way it had always been for 20 years. The meeting took place at WDG headquarters, Center City, Philadelphia. 23rd floor conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Martin arrived early, set his briefcase on the table, pulled out the files, the same files he'd carried for 2 decades. Documents proving every capital injection, every bailout, every time Riverside Holdings and Harold Sutton had kept this company alive. The board members arrived one by one. Bradford came in last. His tan looked gray under the fluorescent lights. His suit was perfect as always, but something in his posture had changed. The confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked like defeat. He took his seat at the head of the table, didn't make eye contact with anyone. Martin called the meeting to order. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on short notice. I'm here representing Harold Sutton, beneficial owner of Riverside Holdings LLC, which holds 51.3% of Whitmore Development Group. He looked around the table. Mr. Sutton has asked me to present his position, regarding the company's leadership going forward. Clifford Stevens, one of the outside board members, leaned forward. He was 68, retired real estate developer, had been on this board for 15 years. I've worked with you, Mr. Gallagher, and indirectly with Mr. Sutton for all those 15 years. This conversation is long overdue. Martin nodded. Thank you, Clifford. Bradford's hands were flat on the table, not moving. I've prepared a letter of resignation. He slid an envelope across to Martin. Effective immediately. I'm stepping down as CEO. I accept the consulting position as outlined. $200,000 per year, 3-year contract. I'll remain on the board as a voting member. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a script. Martin opened the envelope, read the letter, nodded once. The board accepts your resignation. Randall shifted in his seat. His face was pale. He'd been Bradford's partner for 20 years. Now he was watching it all end. We'll begin a search for a new CEO. Immediately, Martin continued, outside candidate, industry veteran, someone with experience turning around underperforming companies. He pulled out another document. The company will undergo restructuring, cost controls, project reviews, financial discipline, no more overruns, no more bailouts. Clifford spoke up again. What about current projects? Wilmington is still $22 million over budget. That will be addressed, Martin said. Either brought under control or terminated. The new CEO will make that determination within 30 days. The meeting lasted 45 minutes. Professional, clean, no drama, just business. When it ended, Martin stepped outside and called Harold. It's done. Clean transition. Harold was in his row house in Kensington, sitting in his armchair, coffee in hand. Good. He chose option A. I know. Harold had known Bradford would choose it. Pride would have demanded option B, but survival instinct was stronger. Bradford had a family, a life. He'd take the mercy over the humiliation. The company will be fine, Martin said. Better than fine once we get the right leadership. Thank you, Martin. Harold paused. For everything. 45 years. 45 years? Martin echoed. What are friends for? They hung up. Harold sat there for a moment, thought about Ruth, about the promise he'd made 9 years ago, about Vivian and Isabel and the family he'd protected from a distance for so long. It was over now. The watching, the waiting, the hiding, the truth was out. Meanwhile, across town in Rittenhouse, Vivian was unpacking boxes in her new apartment. 1 bedroom, small, nothing like the mansion on County Line Road. Harold had insisted on paying for it. She'd resisted at first, then realized she needed to accept help. Needed to let her father take care of her the way he'd been doing secretly for 24 years. She'd filed for legal separation 3 days after that dinner. Not divorce, not yet. She needed time-space therapy to figure out who she was outside of Bradford Whitmore's wife. Karen snorts. Mitchell had recommended a therapist. Vivian had her first appointment tomorrow. I need to find out who I am outside this marriage, she'd told Harold. Take as long as you need, sweetheart, he'd replied. At the row house in Kensington, Isabel had moved into the guest room. Temporarily, she said, but Harold knew better. She wasn't going back. She helped with the house-cooked dinners. Harold taught her Ruth's recipes, the ones Ruth had made for 47 years, the ones that filled the house with memories. Isabel was applying to nonprofit jobs, something meaningful, something that wasn't about appearances or money or impressing her father. Dawson had sent Harold a text message 2 days ago. I was wrong about you about everything, I'm sorry. Harold had replied, You're 24. You have time to become the man you want to be. Randall had called yesterday, his voice shaking. I enabled him, Harold. For 20 years, I saw what he was becoming, how he treated you, how he treated Vivian. I should have stopped him, I'm sorry. Do the right thing from now on, Harold had said. That's all you can do. Peyton, the lawyer, had sent a formal letter of apology, returned his consulting fee to Bradford, said he wanted no part of what had almost happened that night. The news stayed quiet. No press leaks, No public drama. The company's stock stabilized. Investors trusted the new direction. 2 weeks after that dinner, Harold sat in his armchair with his morning coffee. Isabel was in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of eggs and toast filled the small house. His phone rang. "Vivian?" "Dad, thank you for everything." Harold smiled. "You're my daughter. That's what fathers do." "I know, but still." "Thank you." They talked for a few minutes about her apartment, about therapy, about taking things one day at a time. When they hung up, Harold looked around his row house. 2847 Frankfurt Avenue, Y 400 Square F, bought in 1978 for $42,000. Still home, still the place where he belonged. Life was settling into new rhythms. Not normal yet, but getting there. 3 months later, March 2025, snow was melting in Philadelphia. Harold still lived at 2847 Frankfurt Avenue, still drove the 12-year-old Honda despite Isabel's pleas to upgrade, still shopped at Save-A-Lot on Tuesdays. Mrs. Rodriguez still asked about Vivian. "She's doing really well," Harold said. Finally, it was true. But everything had changed. Every Sunday, Isabel came over for coffee and cooking lessons. Ruth's recipes, the ones that made the small kitchen smell like home. Every Wednesday, Vivian stopped by after therapy. Her therapist's office was 3 blocks away. The timing wasn't an accident. Mother and daughter were rebuilding slowly, carefully, learning to talk about things they'd never talked about before. Harold had established the Ruth Sutton Memorial Fund. Scholarships for working-class women, pursuing education named for Ruth's belief in second chances. First-year 20 scholarships, $40,000 each. Vivian ran the Kensington Community Support Program, a nonprofit for Philadelphia's homeless population, funded by Harold through the Memorial Fund. She was finally using her social work degree meaningfully. The office was 3 blocks from Harold's house, also not an accident. Karen Mitchell helped Vivian run the nonprofit, sat on the board of directors. Bradford kept his consulting role at WDG, worked hard to rebuild his reputation. His attitude had changed, more humble, more serious, actually listening instead of talking. He was slowly rebuilding his relationship with Vivian. Coffee once a month, at neutral locations. No pressure, no expectations, just 2 people who'd spent 24 years together trying to figure out if there was anything left worth saving. He'd called Harold once. "I was wrong about everything." Harold's reply was simple. "I know. Keep trying." Dawson had apologized in person. He now worked at the Ruth Sutton Fund as development coordinator. Learning about the value of work, of money, of humility, he'd become a different kid. Genuinely, Isabel had gotten a job at a nonprofit. She loved it. Still lived with Harold to save money. Talked about graduate school nonprofit management. The company WDG was profitable again under the new CEO. Last quarter, first profit in 2 years. Projects on budget. Bradford's consulting actually helped when he learned to listen. Martin and Harold still had coffee Wednesday mornings at Russo's Diner. 15 years. Never missed once. "You changed a lot of lives that night," Martin said. Harold stirred his coffee. "I just told the truth. Truth changes everything." Martin smiled. Ruth would be proud. Ruth was always right. Harold looked out the window at Frankfurt Avenue, at the trolley rattling past at the neighborhood that had been home for 47 years. She said, "Wealth isn't about money. It's about what you do with it, who you share it with, how you use it to help others." He paused. I finally understand what she meant. The row house looked the same as it had in 1978. Same brick, same front steps, same slightly crooked door frame that Harold kept meaning to fix but never did because Ruth had liked it that way. Inside, Isabel's things were scattered around the guest room, her laptop on the kitchen table, her coat on the hook by the door, her laughter filling the spaces that had been too quiet for 9 years. Vivian came by most evenings now, sometimes with Isabel, sometimes alone. They'd sit in the small living room and talk. Really talk about Bradford, about the marriage, about what came next. She hadn't decided yet. Maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't. But she was taking her time, making her own choices, living her own life. That's all Harold had ever wanted for her. On the mantel, Ruth's photograph sat in its frame, still tilted slightly to the left, the way she used to wear her glasses. Harold straightened it every morning. It was always crooked again by evening. He'd stopped wondering why. One evening, after Isabel had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Harold stood in front of the mantel, adjusted the frame one more time. "I kept my promise, you know," he said softly. "I took care of them, all of them." The photograph didn't answer, but somehow Harold knew she heard him. Outside, spring sun warmed Frankfurt Avenue. The 12-year-old Honda sat at the curb. The row house stood solid, built from brick and memories. And inside, a man who never needed the world to know he was wealthy, because he'd always known what really mattered. The small things, the true things, the things that last. Looking back at this family story, I see the cost of silence. For 24 years, I watched my daughter suffer in a family betrayal I could have stopped. I thought I was protecting her by staying hidden. I was wrong. Don't be like me. Don't wait until the trap is set to reveal the truth. Every family story has moments where you must choose between comfortable silence and necessary truth. I chose silence too long. God gave us voices for a reason. Use them before it's too late. The Lord taught me 3 lessons through this pain. First lesson, God sees what others hide. When Bradford plotted against me, I wasn't alone. The Almighty was watching, keeping records I never knew I needed. Trust that God is working, even when you can't see it. Second lesson, mercy is stronger than revenge. I could have destroyed Bradford publicly, but God's wisdom whispered, give him a choice. Mercy doesn't mean weakness. It means offering redemption even to those who don't deserve it. Third lesson, real wealth is measured in relationships restored. My bank account never mattered. But watching Vivian heal, seeing Isabel discover her purpose, that's the treasure God wanted me to find all along. Family betrayal cuts deepest because it comes from those closest to us. But here's the truth about any family story marked by betrayal. Restoration is possible. Not easy, not quick, but possible. When we choose truth over comfort, and family betrayal doesn't have to be the final chapter. Forgiveness can write a new ending. If my story helped you see your own family differently, I've done what Ruth asked of me. What about you? Have you experienced family betrayal? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more refined, thoughtful stories that matter.